What up? What up? What up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, this is your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me as he does each and every time, my best friend, my co-host, the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Maneikis. What's going on, my guy?
What's up, bro? What's up, bro? I'm doing all right. Watching the Celtics game last night. I went to bed in bad spirits, but I woke up today. I texted with a few people. My high school coach. I hit up Smitty. I was asking him his perspective on some things. I feel like I have a good understanding of what's going on with the Celtics right now. So I'm excited to talk to you about it without being too negative.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely get in because, so we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. It's about 4 p.m. Central Time. So as you're listening to this, hopefully you're getting set for the Celtics and Mavericks tonight. And on the back half of this podcast, we're really going to dig into the Jason Tatum and Luka Doncic of it all, getting you set for that matchup tonight. But, as we're recording, it's a little bit somber, and it sounds like Greg's going to try and pick my mood up a little bit. Not that my mood's all that bad. So I texted you last night, Greg, as this game was going on. And hopefully, if you're listening to this, hopefully you didn't even bother to watch the fourth quarter. I hope
did
you
not.
found a better. Yeah, I know you didn't. And I was kind of doing the research for the later half of our podcast with it on in the background. I hope if you're listening to this, I hope you found something more productive to do with your time than watch the fourth quarter of what was a record setting 150 points for the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is kind of crazy because number one, obviously, they were without SGA last night. But number two, this is a franchise that had Kevin Durant for a decade and Russell Westbrook and Paul George and has had, even Melo could still at least put up some buckets when he was on their team for a year. Like, this is a team that has had some pretty intense firepower, and they dropped a franchise record 150 points. And, I texted you after the game last night. This was one of those embarrassing, frustrating games. Not one of those embarrassing, man, let's blow it all up. The season's over. The world is falling. But just as a fan, it was just a frustrating game that, it's almost like a closer in baseball that has a bad outing. You just got to move on. You move on to the next one. But it sounds like you do have, you've made some calls. You've talked to some peeps. What is it that has got you feeling, not as down or not as bad about what transpired in Oklahoma City?
It's not necessarily that I don't feel bad about it. I'm just trying to understand like how we've gotten to this point of like experiencing this level of disappointment watching this team this year. So I have a theory. I just want to run it by you. You let me know what you think about this theory. So to me, it's kind of like that Jalen Rose rule I was talking about, what success is. It's a function of your realistic expectations. So I tweeted out today the idea of like confirmation bias in Celtics Twitter. People have a narrative they want to run with. For example, Joe Mazzulla shouldn't be the head coach. So they just look for all of the evidence to confirm that Joe Mazzulla shouldn't be a head coach, right? Jaylen Brown's a terrible defender. They look for all the evidence that Jaylen Brown's a terrible defender, so on and so forth. So I was thinking to myself, what is it about this team that has got me to this point right now where I'm so disappointed? So I think what it is that we as a fan base wanted to believe coming into this year that there was this big aha moment in the finals last year, right? That turned these guys magically through this experience and this run into different players, more mature versions of themselves. Then they come out super hot to start the year. It seems like they learned lessons. We're looking for evidence to prove our theory that that was the aha moment, which confirmed that hope. That hope then turned into a belief that we had got over this, metaphysical barrier that existed, when in reality, they're probably more or less the same players as last year, with slight improvements, but not as drastic as we were hoping, in that we kind of fooled ourselves into believing. What do you think about that?
So explain to me a little bit more. So because I think one of the things that I saw going around with, like you said, a lot of there's half the fan base that is all of a sudden turning on Joe Mazzulla, which I think last night it's there's no way that that's on Joe Mazzulla what happened last night. That was on the players. That was from the jump. And you and I had texted this because I bet the Celtics and the over, which I have for much of the season and has been lucrative for you, boy. And I bet this, and then I saw about 3 minutes later that SGA was out for the game. And I texted you, and I was like, "Oh my god, I just bet Celtics in the over." Kind of penciling in SGA for 30+ points because that's what he does. He's averaging, I think, 31+ per game. Dude's going to be all NBA. He's unbelievably so much fun to watch. And so then when he was out, you said back to me, hey, maybe this is a blessing in disguise or the Celtics just got a big break, something to
Mhm.
that effect. And I said back to you, there's this Doc Rivers quote where he talks about, and Doc Rivers has coached many a team with many an all-star, that he hates when his team goes up against the other team not having their best player, because
Mhm.
there's this sense of entitlement, which Jaylen Brown talked about in the post game, that you come into this, and it's probably pretty natural, pretty, human to just be like, oh, the best player's not there on a team that's already 5 games under, 500,
Mhm.
and we're the number 1 team in the NBA. This should be a cakewalk. This is an easy night. The one guy we're all geared up for isn't there. And that's when you see a lot of times, especially in the NBA 82 game season, team lets their guard down. Team like the Oklahoma City goes ahead and takes advantage. And so, when you talk about these guys having a different mindset, getting past that, metaphysical barrier, as you put it, which I really like the way that you phrase that. And there's been a lot of comparisons to where the Celtics were in January last year when it gets back to this whole Joe Mazzulla thing, and how, we were part of the group that was bashing Ime because we were very frustrated with seeing the
Mhm.
same mistakes
Yep.
over and over again. And so now those same people that weren't patient with Ime, which we weren't, I don't think we called for him to be fired, but we were also growing impatient with Ime as a coach. Now we're calling for Joe Mazzulla. And so when it comes to that mindset, the thing that it felt like had switched, and this is something that Ime got a lot of credit for, which is why I think you're seeing part of this backlash against Joe Mazzulla, because they do have different styles. As Grant Williams talked about, Joe Mazzulla calls a lot of timeouts. It doesn't say anything, which I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't really know what to make of that, but that's just, it's what Grant Williams had to say. But that Ime got them to flip their mindset into being tough, into being mentally strong,
Mhm.
and seemingly being a different team. And I think at times this year, the game has come so easy to them in the first part of the season, like you said, that we didn't necessarily even need to see that. And I think this has been a super long-winded way of trying to answer your question, because I don't know I don't really know the best way to answer as to whether or not they're different or they're the same or somewhere in the middle, which is probably what this is.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm not saying they haven't improved at all, right? I'm just saying like the improvement is more incremental than this huge jump that we thought they had made at the very beginning of the season. Where in the finals last year, yeah, the Warriors more physical than us and all that, but like the offense just was non-existent. We still played great defense in the finals last
Yeah.
year. It was just the offense, all right? So when the offense comes out humming, and that's the one thing that we were all really looking forward to, what types of improvements have they made on that side of the ball? And you see Jason Tatum being more physical, getting to the line more, knocking down threes early on in the season, all this stuff that we were hoping to see from Tatum. He does it, right? Jaylen Brown, tighten up that handle a little bit, slightly improve decision making, getting back to being an above the rim athlete, which we didn't see quite as much last year. He's dunking on heads again, and we're like, all right, Jaylen Brown's coming out, man on a mission, underwater workouts, all these things. He's a new guy, right? And he definitely looks like a better athlete this year, but maybe that, the improvement in his IQ and decision making hasn't quite improved that much as we wanted it to. Marcus Smart now is this like amazing point guard who's the top, I don't know, 12 point guard in the league. He knows how to run the show. He learned from from going up against Steph Curry and all this stuff that he has to play a certain way. And like he has moments and he's been really, really good this year. Marcus has been awesome. But then there are games like last night where he reverts. And the same thing in the Nuggets game. Marcus looked like old Marcus and not the new and improved Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
And, these are habits that these guys keep kind of sliding back into. So like, yeah, we've improved. Maybe it's less frequent that we see some of these bad habits, but when they all happen in the same game, and then they just like, maybe to your point about Ime not being there this year, there isn't that, tough-minded coach who's holding them accountable. Maybe there's some, maybe there's an argument there, but I think that, with the discourse on Twitter surrounding Mazzulla, a lot of people also came back and said, this is on the players. The players have to be able to dig themselves out of it. And I think that's the greater point to what Mazzulla's theory on coaching is. Like the players have to be able to figure it out. Like I can be the greatest coach in the world, but in the toughest moments, I'm going to need my guys to be able to figure it out. The issue is if you don't, if you don't have enough people that know how to navigate those situations,
That know how to figure it out.
that know how to figure it out, then that can just lead to regression. And I think
Yeah.
that's what we're seeing.
And as you were talking, what it really sounded to me is, we always hear about progression's not linear when it comes to young guys in the league, right? And so that's kind of what was jumping to my mind is that last year we saw, a team struggle to find its footing for the first half of the season, and then they took off like a rocket ship. And we were like, that's who this team is now. That's who they're going to be. And you think about a lot of young guys who first year in the league, that's what happens to them. And then second year, it's like, I mean, even Jason Tatum is kind of the example. And I know that his second year was the Kyrie year where everything was weird with the Celtics, but it was kind of like, man, how come he's still averaging 15 points a game? How come he never scores more than 20, 25 points? And
Yeah,
obviously there's a lot of reasons for that, but you were like, oh, maybe this isn't what we thought it was so quickly. And then there's other times where that story never turns around and it actually just wasn't what you thought. And there's other times where it turns into Jason Tatum, who we have now and is an MVP candidate. So, it's one of those things where maybe it's just a learning curve. It could just be a weird stretch of the season. I mean, over 82 games, you're going to have several 10 to 15 game stretches that are a bit weird. And, right now, Greg, let me throw you a couple of stats here that I was looking up, trying to just figure out how to feel or where this team is at. So over the last 15 games, they're 8-7. They're basically a 500 team. You can go back a little bit further. They're basically about 500 over the last 15 to 17, 18 games. Let's just take the last 15 games here. They are 27th in offensive rating in the last 15 games. So a pretty solid sample size. Yet somehow they're still, I think, first in offensive rating in the NBA, which shows you how insane their start was, that you can go 15 games as the 27th offensive team in the league and still be first. They're second in wide open 3-point attempts during those 15 games, getting 20.9, so just under 21 looks a game that are wide open. And wide open through NBA.com is defined as 6+ feet or more space to shoot. But they're only 26th in percentage. They're knocking those down at 32.8%. So that's a massive dip to what you're seeing with this offense. But kind of the weird part, and this is not the time to talk about their defense after the abomination against the Oklahoma City Thunder, but during those 15 games, they're third in defensive rating.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what leaves this team a little bit confounding, is that within those 15 games, or within whatever this last stretch is of 500 basketball, you still see the team that got you so excited at the beginning of the year. That was the team that made the run to the finals. But then you get too often in this last stretch the games of, it's one game, Oklahoma City. It's just one night, Indiana. It's just one of those things against the Magic. Well, when those keep happening, and when the teams behind you, like Brooklyn, win 12 in a row, when Cleveland Cavaliers have a dude dropping 71 points and they're a game and a half behind you, when you have Joel Embiid also playing at an MVP level, James Harden coming back, Tyrese Maxey coming back, and all of a sudden that lead that you had is no longer what it was. It's hard not to feel questioning of this team. But the thing that I keep coming back to is, other than which I hate doing because it's so subjective, is it's focus, it's energy, it's bringing it every night. Because I mean, these guys are professionals, they're humans also, but they're professionals. And so, yeah, that kind of comes with like the territory of what you need to do. It's where do you even go to find the changes? Where are you looking to find these upgrades, other than, like I said, I've laid out the open shooting statistics, knock down some more shots, but it's definitely not that simple.
Yeah. And I think another, all those statistics you just gave me go back to my earlier point that I was making about the success being a function of realistic expectations. At the beginning of the year, and when we went on that huge winning streak, all of a sudden we're having thoughts like maybe this is a historically great team. Like maybe we're going to remember this team 50 years from now as one of the best Celtics teams ever to have existed, right? So then we start looking for evidence that they are that team. And the more and more you lose these games to the teams that you just mentioned, in the Thunder last night, the Pacers, 2 to the Magic, all that stuff, historically great teams do not lose those games, right? So we kind of have to throw that narrative out the window.
Yeah.
This Celtics team is not historically great, which is fine. They can still win a title and not be historically great, right? So they can just be a really good team and still have a lot of success this year. We kind of have to temper those expectations, which isn't me. I'm not saying we don't criticize them and we don't look for ways to improve, but we just have to stop acting like, this team is that historically great team right now, because more likely than not, they're not going to be that team.
Yeah.
They're going to be the team that most people are predicting to win mid-50s, not mid-60s, and that's kind of why I'm feeling a lot better today, is I'm like, okay, but here's where we are. There are a lot of things that the Celtics need to improve. They're not going to be a historically great team. So let's just find the incremental improvements that we can make without acting like the sky has fallen, because too many people are saying the sky has fallen.
And so along the lines of improving, you and I were debating, what are we going to talk about today besides Luka and Tatum, which we're going to do a big breakdown here on in a minute. What else are we're gonna talk about? And you floated out the idea. Well, like, I mean, and this is very popular rhetoric on Twitter, is when something, a game like the Oklahoma City game happens, you already talked about the Joe Mazzulla factor, but it's we need to trade somebody. We need to find something new. And we kind of floated that out as a segment. And there's a February 9th trade deadline coming up. We've touched a little bit on it, that the Celtics are in a unique position where, especially when we were thinking of this team the way we were about a month ago, it's like, man, I ain't giving up anybody in that rotation. So therefore, you're left with, all right, who are you trading on the back end? Whether it's Gallinari, who's injured and has a decent sized contract, and then you're just left with kind of Peyton Pritchard, Justin Jackson, all guys making $2 million or less, of which it's really hard to compile value. Trade exceptions are all about $6 million and under, and then the Celtics do have some picks, but for those that want to make a trade, those that think the trade is the way to go to change up whatever it is, I challenge you to find a trade, because we floated this as a topic and I tried looking around at what would make sense, what I would actually give up, and where I think upgrades need to be made. And I don't necessarily think that the trade route is the way to do it unless there's something outside the box. That's why I want to see if there is something that you thought of, because I don't even know where I would look to for something that makes sense, because I still believe in this rotation. I still believe in the core of this team. And other than Grant, for now, it's tied up for the next 3 to 4 years or so. Jaylen Brown extension pending. It's really tied up into what this team is. And I believe it can be really, really good, really, really high level. And I'm just not at a point where I would really feel inclined to go make a major move unless something blew me away. And it's hard to find a path out there. But did you see anything else as we floated this around as a topic for today?
No, I mean, I didn't really more. It was a thought exercise for me, just not necessarily exploring all the trade candidates and like putting things into the trade machine and stuff like that. It was more just like evaluating what we have and like, do I think the Celtics will make a trade? Do they need to make a trade? And I don't think they do. I like you said, I believe in the rotation. Maybe it's something as like, we hope that Gallinari can be back by the playoffs. Like maybe that's an addition that he's posting things on the internet. Maybe that's just internet content, but it seems like he has a goal to be back this season. And I think Gallinari, when healthy, could definitely help this team. So that is something to keep your eye on. He would definitely be in the rotation if he was healthy. But if you're not trading Gallinari's contract and you're looking at other guys in the team that could be traded, that actually have value and that have contracts that could get you something back, then you're talking about like a major move in the rotation, like trading Malcolm Brogdon, trading Derek White. Like, God forbid we trade Marcus Smart. The year we all think Marcus Smart is no longer going to be involved in trade discussions. This is the
first
year
it's a topic that's off the board, and then we get blindsided by it. That would be the way that it goes down.
Right? Like maybe there's something huge, like, oh my gosh, we just traded Al Horford. Like, what are we doing? I don't think we can because we extended him, but like one of those moves that's out there. And then you have to think, okay, what is actually out there that the Celtics could get back to improve them? And to me, the only improvements would be like a 2-for-1 type of deal that bring in somebody with a bit more scoring punch. I haven't looked into this. I haven't thought about it. First name that just popped in my brain, like Zach LaVine, somebody like that. That's out there.
That's a big swing.
That's a big swing. You know what I mean? Just like someone who's like, oh, we traded Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon and we got Zach LaVine back. The Bulls wouldn't do that. I recognize that, but just a deal like that where we trade 2-for-1, we get somebody back and we're like, okay, now we know, like, yeah, Derek White can have games where he looks great. Malcolm Brogdon can have games where he looks great, but they haven't been quite as consistent as we needed them to be. They haven't stepped up in moments where, one of the Jays wasn't playing great. And that's what we need from them. So the fact that we haven't gotten that from them as frequently as possible, maybe we do need to make a 2-for-1 deal. I don't think we will. I don't think we need to, but it's crossed my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I expect the trade deadline to be relatively quiet. The only thing that I could really see as a move is anything that would qualify as a major or impactful move would be somehow getting a team to take on Gallinari's player option for next year, along with maybe Peyton Pritchard in a pick. And I think that's about as adventurous. And I don't even know what
that gets you to what, 10 mil?
Around there. Yeah. It gets you about 9 mil, 10 mil in that range. And even then, I don't really know who that player is. I mean, I think the most obvious one that stands out at that percentage would be Jay Crowder, but I don't know that
Mhm.
that's, and maybe, and the one thing that I did
It's
think
tough.
of, yeah, exactly. And that was the one thing that I really kind of saw that I was like, maybe this would be is a guy who in a game like last night, in a game like Indiana, is, you don't have to worry about the mentality for the most part of a guy like Jay Crowder. I also thought about old friend Javonte Green, who's on a very team friendly deal of about, I think it's just under $2 million. Is that those guys are going to give a crap in a game like last night, and maybe if they get in the game early and they kind of are the ones to shake it up a little bit and say, hey guys, let's wake the F up and not get our asses kicked, like Jaylen Brown said, then maybe those are the guys, but also I don't know how much, especially in a Javonte Green case, I don't know how much they're actually going to play when it matters. So I don't know really what that move is. And I also, when it comes to a guy like Peyton Pritchard, you know, Brogdon has an injury history. Smart gets banged up when he goes for loose balls. Like, that's a nice luxury. He's a nice luxury, even if he's not a guy that you want. We've seen him play. We've seen him play in the playoffs and make a difference last year. So if you
Mhm.
have to go to him, that's nice to have when you know that you may have guys that could sustain injuries and hurt you, and he can be a threat from deep. So I don't know. Maybe I like having that luxury more than whatever quote unquote energy those guys would bring.
Yeah, to the point of Peyton Pritchard and how much we believed in him last year, and I still believe in Peyton Pritchard. Christian Bale believed in Harvey Dent, Batman believed in Harvey Dent. Like I believe in Peyton Pritchard. Now, think about the finals last year. I think it was game 4. Peyton Pritchard's coming up on the left wing and takes an early in the shot clock 3-pointer that he bricks. As he's taking that, we probably could have got a much better shot than that. But
Mhm.
as he was taking that shot, I was like, "Ooh, it's probably not a good shot," but I believed it was going in, and I was okay with that shot, right, in a big moment. And that was Peyton Pritchard in the finals last year. This year, he hasn't gotten the opportunity, but I still think that that player is there that we all
Yeah.
believe in. You know what I mean? Now, of all the guys that you just mentioned, I have one either or question for you
What you
because I
got?
think they're roughly the same contract. How much is Crowder? Do you know?
It's somewhere around 9-10 million. I don't have
Okay.
it in front of me, but it's about 9-10
If you
million.
had to choose, and it's Gallinari and Pritchard,
Mm-hmm.
and get your Jay Crowder or Alex Caruso, who you going with?
Ooh, that is a great one. I really like Caruso, but I would probably go Crowder just for the size.
Mm,
I think that the depth that we have on our wings, and Jaylen Brown just came in and play the majority of that. But I think our next best option when it comes to wing depth is playing all 3 of our guards together. And Caruso could do that, but now you have 4 guards. Now you have 4 guards that you're trying to figure out where they fit in. And neither are the best shooters. Jay Crowder can get streaky.
yeah,
We've seen it when he was in Boston, and we've seen it when he's made a couple finals runs, and he's played in 2 finals. And
yeah.
Caruso did too as well. He actually won with the Lakers. So I do like that either or. I would lean Crowder, but I do love the way that Alex Caruso plays. I just think then you're in this 4 guard predicament and you're still lacking a little bit on size. So I would lean to Crowder for that reason.
And I know we just gave up 150 points to the Thunder, but if you add Alex Caruso, you have the best defensive foursome in the league. like, I just think Alex Caruso, if you put him
Watch
in
out,
that
Lou Dort.
backcourt,
Watch out, Josh Giddey. If we only had Alex
oh,
Caruso, Jalen Williams wouldn't have gotten 4 straight wide open dunks in the middle of the lane last night.
that was pathetic last night. But I do think Caruso is one of those guys that will never have a bad defensive game. He's
Yeah.
like, that is how he makes his money. Like Derek
Mhm.
White has a good reputation as a defender, but he's not an A-plus defender. Malcolm Brogdon's not an A-plus defender. Marcus Smart, he's probably an A, right? Maybe not an A-plus. There's still some types of guys that can give him some issues. Caruso can guard pretty much anybody. He's
Mhm.
really tough. He gives people problems, and he's happy playing 15 minutes a game and just like doing the PJ Tucker and
For
not taking
sure.
any
The
shots.
guard version, yeah.
So I would rather have Alex Caruso in that situation, and I think I want to start the Caruso to Boston train.
Hey, I mean, like I said, not opposed, but also highlighting once again that in this 500 stretch, our offensive rating is 27th, our defensive rating is 3rd. Size and slightly better offense, I'd go Jay Crowder, but I wouldn't be opposed to. I think both are guys that are worth considering depending on the price. But once again, I think the prices for both of those guys are probably going to get outside of what makes sense. And I'm fine with end of the day. I'm fine with rolling with the team that we
Mhm.
have. I think there's enough internal improvements that this team is going to be right there, championship wise, as long as it remains healthy. So we'll leave it at that. We will pick up the discussion on where this team is at next time we get back on this pod, or next after we go through a couple more games here. But as you're listening to this, you're probably wondering, when are we going to talk about the Celtics and Mavericks? Well, we're going to kind of do that, but we're going to do it in the framework of Luka Doncic versus Jason Tatum this year, generationally, and talk about these two studs in the way that they deserve to be. All right, Greg. So coming up here, as those of you that are listening to this on a Thursday morning, once again, we're recording Wednesday afternoon. We're on the precipice of a historical matchup with Luka Doncic and Jason Tatum, two generational talents and two of the top 5 MVP candidates. We're going to do a deeper dive when it comes to MVP candidates. We're somehow, which seems freaking wild, that we're already at basically the halfway point by the end of this weekend or early next week. So in one of our upcoming pods, we will do a check-in on our second quarter All NBA and MVP rankings that we did from the first quarter. Both of these guys made the top 5 for MVPs in the first quarter. And spoiler alert, they're both going to make the top 5 when we do the second quarter ones as well. So, Greg, I know you wanted to kind of break this down from the criteria. When you look specifically at these two guys,
Mhm.
you have some criteria that you're looking at from these guys that I know you wanted to talk through.
Yeah, just for like MVPs in general, and this is a work in progress. I'm not saying this is defined as this is 100% my belief. But here's my criteria for an MVP ranked in importance. You tell me how you feel about this criteria first, then we can get into how Luka and Tatum meet that criteria. Number 1, must have individual greatness. Number 2, must have team success. Number 3, must have MVP moments. Number 4, must have an effect on teammate performance. Number 5, must have a two-way impact. Number 6, must have a media narrative.
Okay. And that's how you rank those as well, or those are just the
Yes,
6?
that's how.
Okay.
That's currently that's how. I'm open to changing some around, but that's how I have them right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I think all 6 of those play into this, and then there's different scales for each of them, right? Where
Mhm.
sometimes the media narrative, sometimes even though I'm with you that it's 6th, but sometimes it's overwhelming and it's something
Yeah,
that compels you to then move it to maybe a number 2,
for
even if
sure.
it shouldn't
So,
be.
for my thinking, it's like this is how I define it. It's not necessarily how MVPs have been decided in the
Yeah.
past. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in some capacity, all 6 of those fall into the thinking of voters, of fans that like to sit at the bar and have a discussion of it. All 6 of those elements, and I don't think off the top of my head there isn't one that I would add to it. I think those 6 all play a pretty big role in it. So where do you want to go from here with talking about these 6? Just kind of go individually through them.
Let's go. Okay, let's do this in 2 segments. First, I'm just going to tell you the criteria, and you
Mhm.
tell me who would you pick, Luka versus Tatum.
Yep,
Okay, let's go right down the list. Individual greatness,
Luka,
team success,
Tatum,
MVP moments,
Luka,
effect on teammate performance. Tough one.
Luka. That's a tough one, but I'm gonna lean Luka.
Two-way impact,
Tatum.
narrative.
That's another tough one. I'm gonna go Luka on this one as well. So I think I went 4-2 Luka. I think
You
is
did.
what ended up going there. Would
Cool.
would that be your same score?
Let's talk. I'm gonna break it down. I
Okay.
haven't quite decided. I'm gonna give you some stats for each of these. Okay. So here's what I came up with for individual greatness. Starting with Luka, he has 8 40-point games. 3 of those 8 are 50-point games. One of those 8 is a 60-point game. He has 8 triple doubles, and he's first in the league in offensive win shares at 5.4. Tatum, 6 40-point games, offensive win shares, 10th in the league at 3.4. So just in terms of like individual greatness, I think Luka gets that category.
Yeah, I mean that's one that I think definitely skews towards Luka. I know last night I was watching the Celtics OKC game. I like to watch on League Pass, so they'll go through and sometimes give like the NBA Players of the Week just came out, and Kristaps Porzingis got it in the East, Luka got it in the West, and I literally almost spit out my drink when it showed his week of stats because it was like 47.8 points per game, 19 rebounds, and 11 assists. Like, it was
It's
just
silly.
stupid.
Yeah, absolutely silly. Okay, so 1 for Luka there. Team success, I think this one's pretty easy. The Mavs, though not as far away.
Streaky.
Yeah, not as far away as you might think. 22-16 for the Mavs, 4th in the West. Celtics 26-12, 1st in the league, with Brooklyn nipping at their heels. All right, so Celtics get that one. So that's 1 for Luka, 1 for Tatum. MVP moments. This is where it gets interesting. So I did this in a couple ways. First, their top 5 games averages. Okay, so I took their 5 best games of the season, and here are their averages, just that basic stat line. Luka's top 5 games, averaging 47, 13, and 12. Tatum's top 5 games, 41, 8, and 4.
Okay.
Luka moments, right? So this is the category of MVP moments. Luka has his 60, 20, and 10 triple-double. In national TV games, Luka has played in 7 national TV games. He is 4-3 in those national TV games. His numbers are 34.6, 9.3, 8.4. Jason Tatum, let's start with the national TV games, is 8-1 in national TV games. I'm not counting NBA TV.
Yeah. No one should.
Yep. He is 31.8, 8.6, and 4.7. Right. So once again, team success, Luka's slightly better numbers, but Tatum's numbers are ridiculous in those games. Tatum moments. Tatum has the Christmas Day drubbing of the Bucks, the chokeback game against the Lakers, both of those on national television. He has that negative, though, 18 points in the rematch against the Warriors, highly publicized game. He has the block on Luka in the head-to-head on national TV, which is a huge moment. So this is a tough one. I'm going to give this to Tatum over Luka.
Yeah, I think this one is super tight, and I think this one right now you could go, I think, either way with it, as we're approaching about roughly 40 plus games into the season, or around 40 games of the season. I think this is almost going to be a little bit like college football. It's kind of like what's the lasting impression that you have? Does Luka get a game or Tatum get a game where it's the 70th game of the season and it really kind of stamps, oh, you're getting the 1 seed, or oh, you're taking out
like
another MVP
in the
candidate.
Westbrook MVP season when he had that buzzer beater from
Dude, we are best friends for a reason. That was, as you were talking, that image of him hitting that buzzer beater, I think against the Nuggets, was the first thing that jumped to my head, where like, I think that clinched it when everyone that was kind of on the fence was it him? Was it Harden? Was it Kawhi that year? When Westbrook hit that buzzer beater. And now it's so funny to listen to almost every national member was like, they all regret that season. But yeah, I think it's that moment that really kind of sealed the deal for Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point you're just making about the lasting impact, what's interesting, Luka's 3 losses in national TV games were his first 3 national TV games this year. He's 4-0 in his last 4. So
yep. And you look at the 8-game winning streak and them trending up, Celtics kind of trending down /500 over the last 15 games, like we talked about. So I think that it leans Luka, but I also think you could make a case for Tatum. So to call that a draw or even or neutral, whatever you want to say at this point, I think that'd be totally fair.
Yeah. Okay. Criteria 4, effect on teammate performance. This is just such a tough one because Tatum's roster is so much better than Luka's roster. Yeah. I do think Luka does more with less. Maybe he doesn't quite maximize the playmaking of other players, but like, why would you want the ball in anybody's hands other than Luka when he's so damn good?
But at the same time, that's what probably breaks it down a little bit when you get deeper and deeper into the postseason and you have higher and higher level defenses that can at least make that more troubling.
Yes.
And in a weird way, this number 4 criteria plays into the number 6 criteria for me, which is the media narrative, which is going to be exactly what you just said. Luka does more with less, which I think this has been his entire time in Dallas, which is part of what separates him a little bit when we talk about, we've done before, who the top guys under 25. And I think at this point, there's 3 guys and there's really 2 at the top. Zion's in the mix, but he keeps getting hurt, which he just did again. So it's hard to really put him. I think when healthy, he's right there with what Tatum and what Luka are. Zion is still a can be. Morant's right there as well, so I don't want to leave him out. But I think with Tatum and Luka, they're clearly the 1-2 guys under 25 years old that you look to. But it's always, man, look at what Luka's done with how much little support that he has had in his time in Dallas. Yeah. And you compare that with the guys that Tatum's played with, even when it wasn't great with those Kyrie years. He still had Kyrie, Gordon Hayward, Al Horford one time, Al Horford again. It's just the list goes on and on of guys that then you've seen Terry Rozier go and have success in Charlotte, regardless of what you think about that team. He's a guy, he's a
Marcus
baller.
Morris.
Exactly. Marcus Morris, another guy I was thinking of as well. And so he's just had so much more to work with that. I do think that also plays into, like I said, that number 6 point, which is that media narrative of Luka doing more with less.
For sure. And then I think the other argument for Tatum on teammate performance, because he is kind of like a Swiss Army knife on the offensive end this year, he's screening more, he's cutting more, he's relocating more. I think that effect that he has on teammate performance can also, be taken into account, because he does more to help his teammates out besides just do what Luka does, which is just be a black hole in a good way. Right, where everything is just converging around him because he has so much gravity and he's able to just throw every single pass in the book.
But hold on, before you move on from that, because I think for Tatum, the other point would be on the defensive end. I think he helps.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay.
That's the next one here. Okay, so criteria number 5, two-way impact. So ostensibly, my favorite word, Tatum is better, right? He's just a better defender. Except for last night, where I thought he was the worst defensive player on the floor.
The whole team was a whole team thing. I'm not even gonna.
It was Let's not get into that. But Tatum, he steps up in big moments. He guards. He wants to guard the other team's best wing. He does a great job playing his role on the defensive end as well. Some of that will be guarding point guards and chasing them over screens, which is not an easy thing to do. He tries really hard on the defensive end. Tatum's just a better defender. Luka's basically a turnstile. Defensive win shares, which my brother believes in a lot, and he's a stat nerd, so I'm just going to take his opinion on this. I don't necessarily care much for defensive win share stat.
It's a schmorp and a vorp for you, exactly Alexa said.
But because this is part of my criteria, and my brother,
wait, what did you lead the podcast with? Trying to find things that fit your belief.
Yeah. My brother was like, you have to include this. Luka, 3rd in the league, defensive win shares, 1.9. Tatum, 7th in the league at 1.8. Do with that stat what you will. Tatum's a better defender.
Yeah.
All right.
That's easy.
Yeah. Final narrative. Luka coming into the season. The inevitable, like Thanos, MVP, who just upset the number 1 seed Suns in last year's playoffs. He's kind of just like assumed to get MVPs at some point in the future. As you were saying, what was the point you were just making about the narrative? The more with less.
He does more with less than any other player, especially of his age, and makes his team at least have a chance to be great.
Yep. Tatum, slow starter who just led team to the finals where he underachieved. He needed to prove that he learned lessons from the finals, full circle earlier in the pod. Came out scorching hot, Eastern Conference Player of the Month for October and November, and he was the favorite for MVP on most betting sites and among I think it was the ESPN poll. So those are the two narratives as currently constructed. Luka's trending up in terms of media conversation. Tatum trending down just a little bit.
Yeah, and we're like I said, we're gonna have a deeper discussion about all MVPs in the next pod or two. And I really think this year, especially over the last 3 to 4 weeks, every single week you could have a different 5. There's about 6 guys that I think are seriously in consideration, maybe 7. And I think there could be a different slotting of all those guys depending on the week, especially as the standings continue to shrink and get closer and closer. And for Luka, I think right now we're at a time in the season where, like you said, his trajectory is up. Tatum's a little bit down. So I think Tatum, while I probably would have had him number 1 still after the first quarter up until maybe 2 weeks ago, Luka's probably in that spot. Now I haven't decided yet because we're going to let a couple more games play out before we get into it. But, it does feel like from a narrative perspective, besides just the doing more with less, I think going into the season, you and I were even saying, this feels like Luka or Embiid's time to win, or Giannis. It was kind of those 3 are the ones that you felt like, and there was a pretty popular narrative of when will be the next American to win an MVP, right?
Yep.
We've had Giannis back-to-back, Jokic back-to-back. I mean, Jokic should be in this conversation again because he's been unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then you look at the season Luka's having, and I think right now, if I had to decide where that media narrative is going, 2 or 3 weeks ago, especially around Christmas time, even Christmas, maybe Tatum had a slight lead again. Well, Luka's back in the lead now, 8-game win streak, and so this is one that I think is going to go back and forth, and ultimately this will probably actually mirror the team success is what I would predict is how the media narrative plays out.
And it probably shouldn't matter over an 82 game sample size, but Tatum's up 1-0 on Luka, and he had that big moment. So if Tatum goes up 2-0 and balls out and outplays Luka in Dallas tonight, for those of you listening, that might mean something in voters' eyes.
Yeah, and both of these guys are just insane. So here, let me just run through. So Luka is in his 5th season. Tatum's in his 6th season. I want to lay out kind of their stats right now and then some of their credentials against others at this time. So Luka's in his 5th season. He's 23 years old. He's averaging 34.3 points per game, 8.8 rebounds, 8.9 assists on 50, 36, 74 shooting splits. He's a 3-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA, and I think really important, all of those are first team. That's one of my biggest criteria when thinking about who are the best players in the league and where your status is when you retire. Tell me about your first and second team All-NBAs, because that to me really shows you're a top 10 guy. If you're a top 10 guy, we talked about this when we did our top 50 list. Pencil them in for first or second team if they're healthy. That's all you need to know. Is that guy healthy? He's making first or second team every single time. And that really shows you where they're at in the league. For Tatum, he's in his 6th year. He's age 24, averaging 30.9 points per game, 8.1 rebounds, 4.1 assists on 47, 35, 85 shooting splits. Talked about where his defense is at as well. For his career, 3-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA, 1 first team, and then has that Eastern Conference Finals MVP from last year, which goes along with the team success that he's had. So when you think about these guys, it's insane the seasons that they're having. A lot of people are having insane seasons right now, but for the age that the two of them are at, the success that they're having, it makes you think about what does that look like for some of the greats that you might compare them to. So just for reference, age 23 season, Kobe Bryant, 25 points, 5.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists. LeBron, 30 points, 7.9 rebounds, 7.2 assists. Sounds a little bit like Luka. And then just for fun, I threw an MJ in here because his stats are just so absurd. 37.1 points per game, 5.2 assists, 5.2 rebounds, 4.6 assists. And just for the hell of it, he had 3 steals a game. Like, that is some untouchable crap. That is just insane what MJ puts up there. But what I was looking at with Luka and Tatum is if you look at Tatum as Kobe and Luka as LeBron, now without the defense when it comes to Luka, to the level of LeBron, you have some pretty interesting comparisons about potentially what their career trajectory might look like. And it sounds insane because you're talking about LeBron, who for most people is in the top 2 to 3 of all time. Kobe, for me, he's top 10. I don't know. He's somewhere towards the back half of that 10 list. But that could be kind of what we're looking at with Luka and Tatum here. And,
just
the
next LeBron,
it's just wild.
Kobe.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's kind of what I'm saying.
The difference being, LeBron was probably the best wing defender in the league for a couple of years in his prime, and Luka doesn't have that.
Which weirdly enough, Greg, just so as you say that, it's I was looking at their, age 23 seasons. MJ and Kobe, both before they were 23, had made all defensive teams. LeBron didn't make an all defensive team until 08-09. So it took him until about age 25, 26 before he made an all defensive team, which just doesn't seem right thinking back on LeBron's career, to your point. But I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. And I mean, Kobe, I think he probably had a few more all defensive teams based on reputation towards the latter part of his career. But he was a great defender. He picked up 94 feet. He would guard point guards, and he'd do a great job of it. Jordan, obviously, great defender, great in passing lanes, one of the best athletes we've ever seen. And then LeBron, I think once he didn't have to do quite as much on the offensive side of the ball, and he could focus a little bit more on defense, that's when you really saw that potential. And obviously, he has the highlight plays on the defensive end with the chase down blocks and all that stuff. So, yeah, that's really interesting, man. I think, when we think historically about these guys, what it's going to come down to probably is just the final stuff, the rings conversation that always happens. I would expect Luka. The West is tough, man. A lot of great players out in the West. I don't know when Luka's going to make his first finals. I would expect it to be in the next 3 years. I think this year's the Nuggets. I think this is where Jokic, similar to Giannis, where he had 2 back-to-back MVPs. People didn't want to vote for him third year because he hadn't made a finals. Then he goes and wins the finals that year that he didn't win MVP. I think that might be in the cards for Jokic this year. And then Tatum's already got one. He's made what? 3 Eastern Conference Finals, 4 Eastern Conference Finals now.
It's three Eastern Conference Finals, 2 in which you can really say he was the best player on the team.
Yeah. And he's still coming into his own, man. He's still not in his prime. As you said, he's 24, turning 25 soon, but he's going to be completely dominant. And they're both pretty durable too, man. They're both going to play a lot of games. So we're watching some of the best basketball I've ever seen. I'm super excited for the game tonight.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun matchup. I think Tatum really gets up for these matchups. We talked about it. I mean, remember he almost sat out the previous game against the Mavericks. And then, there was some wondering, I forget what the reason was at the time for why he might sit out, but ultimately it was, there's no chance in hell he's missing this game. And then he goes out, puts on a hell of a performance, has the game-winning block against Luka Doncic. So that going into this game, and it's going to be tough because like we said, the Mavericks are on an 8-game win streak. Celtics have lost 2 in a row, have been playing 500 ball, and they absolutely need to come out and show out on national TV in this game because there is a lot of questions looking at the Celtics, especially after this beatdown from Oklahoma City, to show up and say, all right, who are you guys? Because, people want to say it's the coaches. Some people want to say it's the players. Well, just collectively as a team, who are you guys right now when you're going up against an MVP candidate, against a team that's streaking? Are you going to make a stand in Dallas? And I do think this is going to be, it's as important as a game in January can be, right? Like it's not, I don't want to make it seem like it's the end of the world if the Celtics lose this game, but I do think it's important for them to make a stand, and at least they have to play. Scal kept saying this, which it meant nothing but as much as Cal kept just saying, get back to playing Celtic basketball. Yeah, no, okay, thanks, Scal. We know that.
Thanks for the platitude, Scal. Yeah. I think with, the conversation we had going up to the Christmas Day game about how important it was, and it's more important to win that Christmas Day game than, the back-to-back losses to the Magic, and they lost to the Pacers, the 3-game losing streak. And when you think about teams like the Warriors this year, you think about teams like the Heat, for them, as long as they're winning those big games, that they're still going to be dangerous in the playoffs. Now, the conversation with the Celtics are obviously going to be dangerous with the playoffs. It's just that we probably need to have a top 2 seed, probably the number 1 seed to win in the playoffs. So I think that's more along the line, because like if we just win the big games, and if you're looking at it from an outside perspective, they're going to be like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. They gave up 150 to the Thunder. They showed up and like dominated Luka. They showed up and beat the Bucks on Christmas. Yep. They won the second game of the rematch against the Warriors. Like all these little checkpoints that probably are a better test of how the team will perform when the lights are on, So yeah, it stinks that they lost for, bring it full circle again to last night's game. It stinks that they lost to the Thunder. They're not playing good basketball, but we'll see how they play tonight against the Mavs. And I expect them to show up. I expect Tatum and Brown both to be ready to play. And I'm excited for the Celtics to win this game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big Tatum night. Standings are getting tighter, so those games are going to matter more and more. And to your point, I think there's 5 very, very good teams in the East. Get the hell out of that 4-5 matchup. Yeah. You do not want to have 3 rounds of trying to go through that gauntlet. I think that's going to cross you off for me when we get to playoff time, that I'm not even looking at those teams, because that's just going to be too tough to get through 3 rounds in the finals. So we'll see where the cards all fall. The cards will all fall where they may, and we'll discuss it when we come back next week. But that's going to do it for this episode of Green with Envy. As always, Greg, it is a pleasure hanging out with you and talking about Luka, Tatum, and all things Celtics. For as bad as it looked coming into it, it leaves me feeling pretty good that this is where we wrap it up today. Any final thoughts, and then let us know what we're going to hear on the way out.
Yeah, just last thought. Let's just stop sounding the alarm. Stop sounding the alarm. We know the button's there. We know we can press the button.
Press the button. Go ahead. Press the button.
Push the gosh darn button. Yeah, but
shout out to you if you understand where that reference is coming from with our horrible impressions and trying not to do bad accents.
I can do it.
Yeah.
But we're going to play you out with some music from my band down here in Austin, Texas. We're called Black Sheep Optimists, and this one is called Skywalking. Peace, everybody.
Peace.